It's a pleasure to be here to help wrap up this conference with what is sure to be a really inspiring talk. And I sense there's a bit of a high in the room for this keynote, although that could be a sugar high from those Halloween candy bars we may or may not have pilfered from our children last night. But no, a genuine sense of excitement for this particular keynote, who is a real get for the conference. Once again, just to remind you, for this session, we are using Pigeonhole, so we're asking you to submit any comments or questions that you have. They will appear up on the screen, and we'll go to them after my chat with our keynote. So whether you are a CEO or a thought leader or a startup entrepreneur or a grassroots activist, you will know the name Tristram Stuart. Tristram is a writer, a campaigner, a business owner, and a National Geographic emerging explorer. So I had to look that up on National Geographic. I wasn't sure what is an emerging explorer. It turns out that their program recognizes uniquely gifted and inspiring scientists, conservationists, and storytellers, so it's a pretty big deal. He's also well known for his Feeding 5,000 events in cities ranging from Los Angeles to London, where they feed 5,000 people from food that would have gone to waste. And while we open today's conference starting from the vastness of Katie Coleman's outer space, we are closing it today with our feet firmly planted on the ground. Tristram's work at the frontier of food waste has brought forward ideas that test our understanding, not only of the systems we rely on as a species to survive, but also our understanding of who we are, our humanity. In a world of waste, how can we exist with the limits of life systems? What are the local actions in the here and now that help us realize our human potential, deliver on a sustainable future, and ensure our survival? Tristram, as an advocate and entrepreneur, provides us with suggestions for action and change that are not only practical, but are globally system-changing. They are dynamic, creative solutions that organizations and individuals can adopt and literally change the course to a future without waste. So, to hear some of those impressive and inspiring ideas, please join me in welcoming Tristram Stuart.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll leave that there and come back to it. So, Denise, when she invited me, she's been trying to get me here for a few years. I joined you by teleconference in 2015. She said she wanted me to give a keynote that would both bounce off Katie Coleman's keynote this morning, inspire, give the big picture. I'm going to try and do some of those things, but I thought I would start with a little bit of anger. This is where it started for me. When I was 15, I was feeding my pigs on food waste. I visited my local supermarket. I looked into the trash cans around the back, and this is what I saw. Lots and lots of perfectly good food going to waste. And I went to the manager and I said, you know, can I take that stuff home every day, feed my pigs, all the bread and things like that? He didn't even want to talk about it. They started locking the bins so you couldn't get into them. It made me angry. But, you know, back home I had all the food waste from my school kitchens, feeding it to my pigs. They made me happy, delicious pork. I started eating that food myself, which made me happy, delicious. But it was that combination of kind of, yeah, free food, great, and that's what I want to talk about, is can I have a show of hands? We're all involved in some way in waste, and there's a lot of waste out there in the world. Now, I want you to think about the thing you're up against, the landfills full of rubbish, the oceans full of plastic, whatever it is that's really like, in your life. Just think about that, dwell on it for a second, and then can we do this, please? Can you can you give me the noise that it makes you feel when you think about it? Okay, after 3. And don't do it quietly, because I'll just have to do it all over again. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. We are in the industry of upcycling anger, I would argue, into joy. Because the solution to all of those problems that make us go, "Ah!" are usually fun, inspiring, good, positive, better ways of managing the world's resources and managing our own resources and managing our life. And that's what I did as a 15-year-old kid. I turned this food that was being wasted into pork, into my own dinners. Subsequently, I thought this would be an idea to share with lots of other people, and I started organizing these Feeding the 5,000 events, feeding 5,000 people, all with food that would have been wasted. And that was a way of spreading celebration, spreading joy, of spreading companionship. Companion has become my favorite word. Its etymology is com, which is with, and pan, which is bread. A companion is somebody you eat bread with. And when we share meals, we make friends. People often talk about the waste of resources in that 1.3 billion tons of food we waste every year on planet Earth. Think of all the friends we could make if we went and shared that food with other people. Anyone who's read anything about bonobos, pygmy chimpanzees, they're our closest animal relative. And as I was telling Jane Goodall a few months ago, one of the things they do when they have surplus food is they go out and they find people to share it with. And the interesting thing is that they select strangers above friends to share their food with. They're turning food surplus into social capital, making new friends. And that is the power that food has. It's the power that the food waste movement globally has cottoned onto. We can turn this terrible problem into joyful, celebratory solutions. We've now done this event in, I've lost count, over 50 cities around the world. Hands up, who was involved in the Feeding the 5,000 Vancouver? A few. Hands up in Toronto, who was involved in the Feeding the 5,000 in Toronto just a few weeks ago? Yeah, and some of the people in this room. Second Harvest were there, key partners in that joyful and celebratory event. I think I'm going to shut up for a second. We're going to have just a 3-minute video to give anyone who hasn't been to a Feeding the 5,000 a sense of that, the joy, the celebration that can be got out of this tragic problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, Big Ben is sounding 12 o'clock. Welcome to Feeding the 5,000.
Well, Feeding the 5,000 is about a really good partnership between a number of organisations to really try and raise awareness of the issue of food waste, both from retailers, from consumers, from a whole range of people.
We want to feed 5,000 people, but we also want to feed you with food that would otherwise be waste. The food that you're being offered today is stuff that goes into landfill. It's perfectly acceptable, it's good grub, but what we have got is we've got stuff that the supermarkets say no to, the consumers say no to.
In this country we waste so much surplus fit for consumption food, and it should be going to people.
With our population increase, we're getting to the point that food wastage is ridiculous, especially in the UK.
Yeah, hopefully things like this will raise awareness and stop food waste in the future.
Friends of the Earth are here to demonstrate how much food that can't be used for humans can be used for animals. So we've got some live pigs that we're actually feeding the waste from apple pressing today. Visitors here today are getting to drink the apple juice, and then the pressed apples are actually being fed to our pigs as well. So it's there to demonstrate a much more efficient way of using food, so it doesn't go to waste.
16 million tonnes of food waste have been thrown away every year in Britain.
For the average family, they could save £50 a month simply by making the most of the food they buy.
The vegetables that are being used for lunch are wonky. right? Cosmetically, there are issues, but they are fresh and very tasty.
All these carrots are not suitable for supermarkets, wrong size, wrong shape. We're just highlighting the unnecessary waste of food here today, getting people to help bag stuff up, then we can deliver it off to our charities.
I've been a freegan for 30 years. Such a crazy world that we live in at the moment, with so much food wasted and so much starvation in the other parts of the planet.
We need to all respond to this by saying, look, the global food waste scandal, whereby we waste a third of the entire world's food supply, is something that we can solve. It's causing environmental destruction, it's contributing to global hunger, but the solutions are delicious, and that involves eating and enjoying food rather than throwing it away.
No, don't clap. Don't clap. Instead of the give me the yeah. The yeah. Yeah, when you've done that thing that you set out to do, and it's like, yeah! Come on, 1, 2, 3, yeah! People outside this room, when they heard us first, they were like, ooh, don't like the sound of what's going on in there. Steer clear of that lot. But I reckon in a couple of minutes, people are going to start poking their heads in and go, ooh, what's going on in there? That sounds cool. That sounds fun. I want to be part of that. I know which room I want to spend most of my time in. It's the one in which we're saying, yeah, more of the time. That's not to say that we can do without the anger. It's kind of embedded within the yeah. It starts with the anger, it starts with the frustration, and we upcycle it, we transform it into the yeah. I was having a conversation with Louise Schwartz during lunch. She used the word gravity. She runs, for anyone who doesn't know her, she's on the Zero Waste Council. She runs her own recycling business, and she used the word gravity. The gravity of the situation, the gravity of running around trucks. And I thought, yeah, that's the connection with the cosmonaut. Gravity and levity. Having that levity, that playing around that we all saw with the sweets going into the toilet and catching them in the air, that's levity. The gravity is there, and we counterpoise it with the levity. And that's what I've tried to do in all of my campaigning. You've got to give that celebratory tone, and you've got to be confrontational as well sometimes. That's how we generate opinion changes. You get stats like this, and that's what our friends at the big supermarkets sit up and listen to. And that's when they change their policies. It's happened all through my life. Anyone been through the countryside in autumn and you pass people's gardens, small old orchards, and you see this kind of carpet of apples on the floor? No one's picked them. You know, maybe somebody made 5 apple pies, but an apple tree can produce enough apples for like 500 apple pies. And you have to be quite radical at apple storage to be able to pick them all, store them all in the different ways. You seen that? Oh. Well, ever since I was a kid, we've gone round our local village, all the neighbouring gardens, knocked on people's doors and said, can we pick all your apples? Shake them out of the trees. We're going to take them back to our farmyard. We have a big apple day. Everyone comes, all the kids, all the families. We get all those apples that would otherwise be wasted. And those apples are turning their into yeah. It's part of nature. They go into those lovely little demijohns, they bubble away, and they become cider. Hard cider, I think you call it around here. And when you drink hard cider, everyone goes, yeah. That's nature. Nature is doing this transformation, the upcycling for us. We just need to follow that flow. I wasn't actually going to talk about ugly fruit and vegetables today. For anyone who picked up on the red rag to the bull, I quickly changed some slides and chucked these in. So I agree with what the panelists earlier said. Claire and Chris, well, I'll come on to why I agree, but ugly fruit and vegetables, or the waste of them, has stood for the waste, the outgrading, the rejection of very often 30-40% of a farmer's crops because they don't fit the cosmetic standards. Now, I feel kind of responsible, having launched this campaign many years ago in the United Kingdom and having seen it spread to every continent on the earth. So all the supermarkets in all the inhabited continents have taken on this message, adjusted their policies. The target has always been to relax those cosmetic standards. An example of the kind of work that we've done, this is something that really annoyed me. Now, anyone who saw me in 2015 will think, oh, I've seen that before. I'm going to give you an update. We got really annoyed with all the supermarkets because these are the green beans that have won the competition, the beauty contest. They've got through all the cosmetic standards. They've got into the pack house outside Nairobi airport. They're ready to be shipped off. 30, 40, sometimes 50% of the crop has already been left in the field or rejected at the depot. These are the winners. They get trimmed. You can see they're trimmed fine beans, and they're trimmed to fit into a 9-centimeter punnet. And of course, the beans didn't know they had to be 9 centimeters long. So they grew all sorts of different lengths, 14, 5, 10. And we found that 20% of the final winner beans were being trimmed off. Now that's kind of like ridiculous. Mountains of these trimmed beans all over the place. Most of them left there to rot. Some of them get off to cattle feed, but most of them just sit there and rot. That was a real moment. Seeing these farmers in Kenya, they don't have enough food to eat. They can hardly feed their families. They're farming land increasingly to grow food for people in rich countries, land that could have been used to feed local people or left for the lions and the tigers, sorry, not tigers, lions and elephants to roam in, but they were being used to grow beans that were then being left to rot. So we organized our typical, events. We had a disco soup in Nairobi. Everyone came round. We prepared massive meals out of it. We did a Feeding the 5,000 in Brussels. Some of these beans were included. We took the evidence to the supermarkets. And when I last spoke to you, we'd got halfway. Tesco had agreed to stop taking the tail off the beans, and they started just topping them. And that cut waste by 30% on the producers' side. We went and visited those producers, and that resulted in tens of thousands of extra euros of yield per year. And we calculated that if you transposed that saving onto all the green beans, only green beans exported from Kenya to Europe each year, it would account for $15 to $20 million worth of green bean, which is 0.04% of the entire economy. And that's just one example of the many ways in which we've convinced supermarkets to change their cosmetic standards, change their details on how stuff should be trimmed, packed, and the rest of it. Subsequent to that, we said, so why don't you stop taking the top off as well? So they tried it. And this is now the industry norm in the UK. And not only did that cut waste again on the producer side, but it massively extended the shelf life of the green bean because it was no longer being cut, which is where it's blemished and it starts going off, and customers preferred it. It's kind of win-win-win situation. It's one of literally hundreds of cosmetic standards changes that Feedback, the organization I founded, has convinced supermarkets in the UK and internationally to do. We convinced Carrefour to re-examine their banana cosmetic standards and sourcing. They cut the food waste down so that something like, and Tesco has done the same now, 98% of bananas now grown on their plantations are used by somebody. Now, I think where this whole thing has fallen down is that some of the supermarkets have kind of leapt on it and started stocking ugly fruit and vegetables in supermarkets, and I think that's maybe what was being referred to as the distraction. And I would agree to a large extent that this is a gimmick. Indeed, it was Feedback that did the examination when supermarkets started doing this in the UK, that found that the ugly fruit and vegetable lines used roughly 2% of the total waste produced on farm by the basic cosmetic standards of the main lines. So it wasn't a big part of the solution, that particular marketing policy. I still think it's probably worth doing because it serves the purpose of educating and opening people's minds to the idea that produce can look all shapes and sizes, and that idea can be transposed to the home where blemished fruit and vegetables might be eaten, as well as in the supply chain. So I wouldn't quite call it a distraction, but it's, you know, I agree that that has taken off in a way that isn't kind of attacking the core problem. So that's my rejoinder to that particular part of the panel. But it did make me go, yeah, when I saw these beans and when everyone else started doing the same thing. And my God, you know, when I cast my mind back, when I started, you couldn't have filled, there's a little yellow square on the stage. I don't know if I'm supposed to be standing still in it. I don't think I am. You could have filled this yellow square with the number of people who had food waste prevention in their job title. It's now a global industry. Everyone's cottoned on to the idea. We have a sustainable development goal specifying that we need to halve food waste by 2030. It's a mass global industry. There are entrepreneurs, there are campaigners, there are policymakers in most countries in the world tackling food waste. And that's great. It's wonderful. The only thing more distressing than that is just how much food still gets wasted. This is another thing that I talked about in 2015, and I want to give you the update. These are farmers who suffer from the problem of order cancellations. They've grown a crop for supermarkets in rich countries. These are Kenyan farmers. Not a single leaf of the basil they grew was harvested. When they destroy crops like that, these are day laborers, and day laborers who are paid less than $2 a day. And when their crops are cancelled, the orders are cancelled and they have to destroy crops, the day laborers don't get paid, or they get paid half wages, and they literally can't feed their family. I've never felt more ashamed of being who I am, a European privileged person, than when I met these people and got on video them explaining what this situation was like for them. And the reason why supermarkets are able to get away with this is because they have very consolidated markets, very concentrated retail markets in many rich countries now, and that gives the retailers disproportionate power, and they treat their suppliers as a result with unfair trading practices, of which order cancellations, the changing strictness with which cosmetic standards are applied. So in a good year, when there's loads of oranges or bananas, the supermarkets are really strict about cosmetic standards, and they have it on a piece of paper so they can say, no, we're not going to have any of that, we're not going to pay you for it, it doesn't meet the contractually agreed specifications. In a bad year, when there's not so many oranges or bananas, they're like, yeah, bring it on, we'll have whatever you have. So the cosmetic standards are not just inherently wasteful, they're used as an instrument to offload waste onto the supplier and to control supply without incurring the cost of essentially the glut market that they like to have, because that makes it a buyer's market. Well, we got a law through in 2013 in the UK called the Groceries Code Adjudicator Act that made it illegal to do that. And if you don't comply with that law, you can get fined up to 1% of your turnover, which is a massive fine, as well as all the reputational damage when it gets into the press. It's had a transformational effect. Feedback didn't stop there. We took the fight to Europe, and about 3 weeks ago, Commissioner Hogan, who's in charge of agriculture and food, put the abolishing of unfair trading practices, of which this was a prime example, top of his priority list. He's drawing up a directive for the whole of Europe to prevent this kind of practice. As if it were a gift from the Canadian press, I don't know if anyone saw the front cover of the Globe today, there's a price-fixing scandal on the bread pricing in Canada. Anyone read that story? Now, it may sound tangentially related, but the reason why there is price fixing is because, or the reason why you have a market in which price fixing becomes possible, is that consolidation of power. You've had lots of takeovers. I can't remember who bought who. Costco bought Safeway and Loblaw bought somebody else. That's what's happening, right? You're getting this consolidation. Fewer and fewer companies controlling more and more of the market gives them disproportionate power. Now that puts them in a position where they can price fix, because instead of being a diverse and competitive market, there's just a few players who can collude. That very same market structure lends itself to unfair trading practices, and I can guarantee you, without having looked into this issue in Canada, that it will be playing out in a way that causes food waste as well, order cancellations, and using cosmetic standards in the way that I just described. So a big yeah for Europe, and a grrr for the Canadian grocers. Get on the case. There's one other thing that made me go grrr. In 2008, when I visited this factory, and anyone who's seen my TED Talk will have seen the grrr, 13,000 slices of fresh bread every single day from this one factory, because they don't use the end slices or the slice inside the lot. So the 4 slices per loaf of bread coming into this sandwich factory, straight into the bin. And I went to Pakistan in that year. It was the year of the food price spike, and I met people who were buying wheat in the market, buying flour in the market, who were no longer able to feed their daughters, specifically daughters. Oh, yeah, that made me go, Urgh. That price spike globally was caused by excessive demand and insufficient supply. We contribute to that demand in rich countries when we buy lots of bread, lots of wheat, and chuck it into the trash. And about 5 minutes before I was due on stage, I sent Denise an email saying, don't worry, I'm coming back. I just have to go and visit my hotel. I had this idea that I should go and have a look in their kitchens to see how they're doing. And, you know, I'm feeling a little bit traumatized, actually, because even though it is my hobby and I do it everywhere, going and looking in bins, I went to the kitchens. I said, I've got a weird question. It needs a quick answer. Can you take me to your trash cans? I want to have a look. And I'm about to give a speech and I need a prop. And he was very cool. Yeah, Milo, great guy. He took me down, and 40-gallon bins like this high, brimful, with a bag on the inside. I mean, you couldn't lift it out, right? You can't lift it out. And not just one, an entire room full of them. And I was like opening it, I thought somewhere there is going to be bread. I didn't want the kind of fruit and the vegetables. There was tons of that. I wanted bread to go with this bit of my talk. Sure enough, there was one, and it was literally like, I just had to kind of chuck a little bit into a bag to show you. He described the hotel as being the leading hotel in Vancouver in tackling food waste. And he may be right. They compost all of this waste which is actually, I mean, come on, like this, we could all have this for lunch tomorrow. It's like, there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Perfectly good bread. And yeah, so that always made me go grrr, and it really bugged me. And then I met this brewer in Brussels. And he was making beer, and he was putting bread in it. I thought, I've come across a lot of cool uses for food waste. This one is brilliant. I said to him, look, can you come to Britain, show us how to do it? And he was like, yeah, brilliant. I love what you guys do. He came over, he worked with one of the brewers, and we launched the business Toast Ale. In the UK, we transform, we upcycle perfectly good bread. In fact, it's mainly those sandwich crusts that I saw in 2008. So it's day fresh bread. It's fresher than the stuff you can buy in a supermarket. It goes straight to our brewer. We replace around a third of the malt that you would otherwise use, and brew this craft beer out of it. It's one awards every couple of months since we started, even blind taste testing awards, international coveted awards for just the quality of the beer. It makes me go, yeah. 100% of the profits of Toast Ale go to Feedback, the non-profit I founded. We're now stocked nationally by big supermarkets and independents alike. We've started brewing in the northeast of the USA, stocked by Whole Foods and loads of independents. We launched a couple of weeks ago in Brazil. We're launching in a couple of days in Iceland. And with the help of Deborah at Second Harvest and some other people in this room, I hope that we're going to be able to drink Toast Ale in Canada soon. Not only that, we open sourced our recipe, we put it on our website, so that any home brewers, this has been downloaded something like 36,000 times since we put it up. And also, if people want to do it without us, I mean, what we really want is to build a global brand for Toast Ale so that everyone everywhere can connect bakers, brewers, local non-profits. So when we do an international license, we partner up with a local non-profit, and a percentage of the revenue goes straight to them. And we want that to happen everywhere. And where was I going with this? Anyway, we can drink lots of beer, and it is my belief that we will win this battle when we're having a better party than the people who are destroying the planet on the other side. That's how we're going to get people into our movement, by having a massive party. Oh yeah, that was the first, I'm not kidding you, the first bottle of Toast Ale ever drunk by anyone was Jamie Oliver. I was sitting there in his studio. I was, as you can imagine, quite nervous. I hadn't tasted the beer myself. His face might have screwed up in disgust. He liked it, and so did the beer sommeliers who were there, and so did lots of other people now. So, yeah. It's something to celebrate. And I do believe in the possibility of creating a circular economy. And for sure, businesses like Toast Ale have a big role to play. And as we all know, there's a boom industry. Chris's presentation, brilliant stats on how much investment is going into these solutions and the entrepreneurs behind them. It's a boom industry. At the same time, those big corporations, the Monsantos and Cargills of this world, are still telling us we need to double food production. And unfortunately, food production being the single biggest impact humans have on planet Earth, there is no way of doubling food production without ruining the planet on which we depend. It's possible that Monsanto will come up with some amazing crop that will double yield, but they haven't even increased yield by a couple of percentage points. It's not even on the horizon to do that. The way in which food production will be doubled or increased dramatically is by chopping down the world's remaining forests, extending the agricultural frontier into the world's remaining places, massively contributing to climate change, water depredation, and all of those other problems. This is what we're up against. This is the And we all know that a third of the world's food is wasted. We all know that 2 billion people already eat too much. So how is doubling that problem going to be the solution? This cabbage grew to double its size. This is one of our gleaners going, yeah, I picked this cabbage, it was going to go to waste. The Gleaning Network donates it to charities that feed hungry people. Ironically, when we do double food production, it just gets wasted. Somehow we've got to stand up for the cabbages of this world. And I think we've got to do that by giving the cabbage a big round of applause and remembering to celebrate all the things that we do. Yeah, thank you very much.